Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to What Would You Miss? Today I have a very personal guest on. Her name is Jordan Carfagno, and our line runs really deep, so I'm really happy to have her here today, and just going to carry on the conversation. All right, Jordan. So, wow, we go back a long time. And actually, I just met you the other day for the first time, but yes. I know your mother very well. We grew up together, and I knew your dad, too. And he was a great guy, really funny. He drank a lot, and can remember partying with him. And I also remember the day he died. It really affected me personally, and I'm sure it rocked your world.
That's putting it mildly.
You know, what is it like growing up now? You know, you have a daughter, and knowing how your father died and playing that into your life.
It's hard because my daughter was 3 when it happened. So explaining it to her that Grandpa was gone was very difficult. Her being at the age that she was, we pretty much just told her Grandpa was sick and he needed to rest. Mm. And we contemplated taking her to see him to say goodbye and everything at the funeral home because the funeral director was a friend.
Yep.
So
I worked at that funeral home.
Yep. So Skippy was going to give us a chance to bring Riley in separate from the actual funeral and just say goodbye, but we figured she wouldn't understand why he wasn't waking up.
Right.
So it's just, she still to this day says, I miss Grandpa.
Sure.
She talks about him constantly, even just in the 3 short years she had with him, but the two of them lit up a room.
I believe that. So just for story purposes, your mother and I have been friends for as long as I can possibly remember. And when I started What Would You Miss, she of course liked it right away, and she was following it. And one day I just happened to say to her, "Hey, Katie, are you ready?" And she said to me, "I can't believe you just said this to me. I just felt like I am ready now to share it." And she put a picture up of your father holding a fish, and it was a great picture, but it honestly broke barriers because men don't talk about mental health. And it got a tremendous response. 76% men were focusing on that picture. And it was really incredible to me. But the beauty of it was then you messaged me because you were ready too. You know, how did it feel to finally be able to say something? You know, What Would You Miss is very, very gentle. It's an easy way to talk about somebody who's died by suicide. How did it feel, and what was the response for your friends to you when you posted it?
My friends have always been supportive with the situation, but being able to actually get out and talk about it, like, they're not always comfortable talking about it because it's like, oh, like, they don't want to poke and make me sad.
Right.
But in reality, it's something I live with daily. Mm-hmm. I'm never going to be like, okay. Right. There's always going to be that part of me missing. But being able to share that and to show people that this person is still loved, even though they're gone. I feel like that's what makes the difference. That's what keeps him alive.
Right. Did you see anything like this coming with your dad? Was it a surprise? I mean, I know that your dad has, dealt with things throughout his whole life. Like I said, I've known him for as long as I can remember. But, was it a surprise to you?
It was. That man was afraid of needles.
Right.
Let alone anything else that involved pain. So for him to take this route to end his own life caught me completely off guard.
And I guess it just does. Like, I think even when we know someone's living with depression or, they have a severe mental illness, statistics are higher there, but it's still always going to be a surprise, no matter what. Do you remember that day? Like it
plays in my head every day.
Yeah.
From my sister calling me.
Was she who called you first?
Yeah.
Oh.
She called me. It was actually a couple days after my birthday. My birthday was the 25th. He died the 28th. Mm. And I was going out that night for my birthday. It was my best friend's birthday the next day. So we were going to go out. We were going to have a good time. And Brittany was going to take my daughter. So my phone rings, and I see her name pop up, and I'm like, she's just telling me she's running late or something. And I hear it in her voice the second I answer. She says, "Jor, where are you?" "I'm at Mom's house." "Why? What's wrong?" And she pauses and takes a breath. And she says, Jor, Dad hung himself. And right there, everything just crashed. And I remember calling everybody. Someone take Riley. I need to be there.
Yeah.
I need to get to him. And I remember calling my boyfriend and just yelling at him because he didn't understand me because I was crying so hard. I'm like, stop being a jerk and listen. And I just remember I ended up taking her to my best friend's house that I was supposed to be going out with. And he picked her up over there. And I just remember screaming the whole way there. How could you do this to me? Why would you do this to me? This can't be real. Like, you can't do this to me. And I remember pulling up to the house and the police and the EMTs. And then there was my brother. My brother, who has just been like that very blank slate, very non-emotional person, came running out and grabbed me. This kid does not hug. And he just grabbed me. And I broke. Everything inside me just broke. I had lost my best friend. I went to that man for everything.
Your dad was that type of person.
He was. Mm-hmm. And just in that phone call, that split second, my world went from here to here. Mm-hmm. And it's never been the same.
Sure. First of all, I want to say something. I thank you so much for sharing that. I know how hard it can be, and I also know that it also can be therapeutic. A lot of people would want to put a label on this podcast that it's a trigger because of what we're talking about, and I totally disagree with it. I think what we do need to do is talk about this because triggers are meant to set off your emotions so that you can work through them. The only way you can work through them is if you face a trigger. It's just how it is. And I think it's really important to have these open, honest conversations and really talk about how someone who dies by suicide, how it affects you afterwards. Because, first of all, suicide is not selfish. It's a very painful act. There's a lot of pain involved in there. And second of all, the pain that's left afterwards, the ripple is like long lasting. It doesn't just go away instantly. When you talk about your dad, you can't look at him, and I know you do this, so that's why I'm saying this. You don't look at the suicide. You have to look at the person he was. Otherwise, you get wrapped up in that. And you said something while you were just talking, and you said, why did you do this to me? How do you feel about that now that it's been a couple years afterwards?
Afterwards, I realize he didn't do it to me.
That's my girl.
He did it. He was in pain that I'm never going to understand. Because yes, it's painful to live without him. And yes, I wish every day I could be with him. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm never going to understand that step. Mm-hmm. Because I couldn't do it myself.
Right.
Because I could never put my family through this. Mm-hmm. I couldn't hurt my daughter. And I mean, I don't think he's selfish whatsoever. Because that was a pain he was never going to get over.
Yeah. And I think part of the other problem is your dad and I come from the same generation where we don't talk about it. I mean, I have two attempts that, we didn't talk about it. I remember after, one of them, my dad was like, oh, how you doing? I'm like, all right. Hello, we should really have talked about it a little bit more, but you just didn't talk about it then. It's just our generation just didn't talk about it. It's why it's so important for your generation and Riley's generation to just freaking talk. I mean, we have to just talk about it. Now, I'm going to talk about something else that I think is really important. You are military.
Yes.
And, I've learned a lot through people in service and what it's like, coming out of service and the reality of like losing your identity and all of that. And plus what you see and what you go through, what is it like when you do need to talk about it as military, and what is the conversation you want to bring to the table?
It's a whole different world being in the military. And like my family doesn't quite understand that. They're just like, oh, like they were never. Once I had Riley, they weren't as supportive of me being in the military because they're like, oh, you're a single mom. You need to be home with your daughter. Right. You can't be off fighting a war.
Damn Italians.
But getting out of the military, I did lose that part of me. Like, you're always a soldier. But now I'm like, I'm a veteran? Like, first off, I don't feel old enough to be a veteran.
Right.
But, like, I lost that part of me. Like, I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm not on the front lines. Not that I never went to battle, which, thankfully, because I'm pretty sure I don't think I would have made it to the airport anyways, knowing my family.
I know your family, and you would not have made it to the airport.
No, I probably would have been stuffed in a trunk and shipped off to China or something.
Vegas,
Like,
probably, but
maybe
whatever.
Vegas, yeah. Somewhere. Florida, the house down there, somewhere.
Yeah.
But it was different because they joke a lot about suicide because they use it as an outlet.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them do suffer from PTSD, and a lot of them will joke about it thinking like, oh, if I say this, they won't think that I'm suicidal. And I've done trainings with them. I went and I was certified by the military to train for suicide prevention.
Awesome.
And I did a training and I brought Dad into it. And normally it's like what they call death by PowerPoint. You sit there and you just like zombie out watching slideshows. And I still had to do the slides and everything because it had to be an official training.
Sure.
But I brought Dad into it and I brought my story into it. And I actually have a friend in the military whose father completed a month prior to mine. So she did it with me. And I had our commanders, our officers, our sergeants crying, standing up telling their stories, telling the stories of how they weren't okay or their friend wasn't okay. I had one whose daughter had attempted. And when I started the training, they see it up on the screen and they see, ooh, suicide prevention. And one of the sergeants' comment was, demonstration, not knowing what he was about to listen to.
Right.
And he came up to me, and from that day on, he apologized.
Yeah.
Every time he saw me, he apologized. And that was years ago. And to this day, like, he's very close with me, and he talks to me about it now. But he was one who had someone attempt. And it's just like a military thing.
Sure.
Like,
I think part of it is we do find humor, comfort in humor. So we
Yes.
do try to joke around sometimes about it. And what you actually did was you opened up this door for them to have a conversation.
Yes.
You know, if we share our stories, it does make people a little bit more apt to want to tell you what's going on in their life. And that's why talking is so important, you know? So this is going to be a little hard, and I'm, you know, just because I know you, I feel like I can do this. And I had said something to someone earlier. You did share your what would you miss for your dad. And I want you to really like take yourself to him, right in front of him. What is your deepest, what do you miss so much about him? And if he was sitting there, what would you tell him that you miss?
I just miss his hugs. That hug, like, could fix anything. He'd just hug me and goof around, and he'd kiss my forehead, and he'd say, I love you, Wiggy. Had horrible hair growing up.
Oh.
And just his infectious laugh.
He did have a good laugh.
Yes. And he was just the biggest goofball. And going back to your partying with him, he came home one night after drinking, and I had a karaoke game on my PlayStation, and I went to bed, and all you can hear downstairs is him drunk singing to this game. I want you to want me. And to this day, like, that song will come on, and I just start cracking up laughing.
Because you can think about him, and it brings you to that. You know, so Jordan, what do you think What Would You Miss can do for people not just grieving, but for someone struggling? What do you think it could possibly do for that person?
I think it'll spark, like, oh my God, if I did this, I would miss out on all of this. Like, for a male, I would miss out on walking my daughter down the aisle, or holding my baby, or finding the love of my life. I would miss my friends, just anything like that. It's going to finally, like, when you're in that moment, you're not thinking about what you're going to miss. You're thinking about what you're missing right now. Like, what's missing from you.
Right.
You feel empty, but then you think, what am I going to miss? I miss listening to music. I miss playing basketball, fishing, anything like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going to stick.
I sure hope so. I really do. Well, thank you so much for coming down. I know that the conversation can be difficult and emotional, but I think sharing it makes such a difference. So thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. And I loved your father dearly, and I love your mother too, but you come from a great family, and I'm so proud to have you as part of this group. So thank you.
There's someone sitting in your chair. I wonder why you didn't take your seat. I look around